frank discussion on the law, life, and liberty. Sponsored by the LaHood Norton Law Group. And now, your objection sustained. Your hosts, Karen Klaus and former Bexar County District Attorney, Nico LaHood.
Thank you so much for listening to Sidebar as usual. I am in a different place. This is the first time I'm probably away and you guys are around. But we have the former Bexar County DA, Nico LaHood, trial lawyer, managing partner of LaHood Norton Law Group, and George Araujo scholar, former chemist and pharmaceutical researcher and director. And as always, you can join us, just like I am right now, by going during the show or after the show. Go to sidebartv.com. Thank you so much, guys, for letting me do this. It's a kind of like a Mother's Day weekend at Texas Tech with my daughters who are asleep in their rooms.
And what do you mean let you do it? We begged you, I think, to come on. The show's nothing without you. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate you for calling. Usually it's George that's away on one of his trips.
I know.
But trips. Just joking. But that's great. Thanks for making the time, Karen. Hope you're enjoying your daughters.
No. Absolutely. I really appreciate it. Every time we discuss different topics that we're going to talk about, I always try to look for the string that connects them all. And it's so hard in the beginning when I see, okay, today we're going to talk about the hypersexualization of children in America. I'm like, okay, how does that fit with Death to America at a conference at a rally that there was this week? And then we definitely have to talk about the entire abortion issue and how Trump made a statement this week that both sides are never going to be happy. That's the bottom line. But when I said, okay, now it's death to babies, it's death to Americans, death to the American family. So, yes, absolutely. It does all go
Well, how
together.
refreshing. So we're going to be talking about death this weekend. That's wonderful.
Right.
Great thread.
Exactly.
But it's real, Karen. I mean, those are great topics, and they're topics that need to be discussed. And there is a thread through all of them because we're looking at something traditional that undergirds this country, and it's a foundation of this country. And the American family is one of them. Obviously, babies. I mean, if you don't have life, then you don't have a future. You don't have future people to govern or to allow to consent to be governed. You don't have anything like that. You don't have entrepreneurship. You don't have anything if you don't have life. And then you think about it, a culture that's dying here. The culture that undergirds this country is a Judeo-Christian culture, meaning just the way we look at things doesn't mean you have to be a Christian to be here, but there's ideas that undergird. But then also just the idea of being ashamed to be an American, to be embarrassed of the American flag, and then the insanity and audacity of a group of individuals to shout death to America from in America while parents, and we're going to talk about this hypersexualization of kids, while parents are going to school boards, yelling, "Don't kill my child's innocence," and they're being investigated by the FBI, but yet these people that are yelling death to America, maybe they are, maybe they're not, but don't seem to be getting the traction that these local or domestic terrorists that parents have been labeled in the past have. So I think those are all good topics, and I think that thread is an accurate one.
George, I can't see you anymore, but I want you to make a comment on this because when it comes to just that one topic, the hypersexualization of children, I mean, what is the point of that? Is it just to get people used to it, and what is the end game on that?
Well, I think the end game is to sort of alienate young kids from what would normally be a positive influence from their parents. Their parents being their primary influence, and really sort of furthering a commitment to the nuclear family, which has traditionally been behind the strength of the United States, at least morally. Try to compare the focus on the family in the 1950s, for instance, Nico, versus what we have today. I mean, it's just night and day. It's a totally different planet. And so I think the end game, I was trying to think of the reference as I was thinking of a response to your question. There's an author by the name of Peter Hitchens, and he wrote a book called The Rage Against God. And he talks about the youth movements of Nazi Germany and communist Russia. And he says, hey, these are startlingly similar. And in both situations, he says you have this ideological or revolutionary state, and that state starts by alienating the kids, the young, from their sort of pre-revolutionary parents. And the hope is that will survive into future generations. You basically change the future that way. And he should know, because he was a correspondent in Moscow. So he speaks, firsthand about how communism operated. And he says that was a critical first step in launching a revolution, basically changing a country from the inside out, Nico, is you start with the young, and you start detaching the young from the influence of the parent and redirect that towards the influence of the state. And we know what the focus of the state is right now. And then he quotes, I think he quotes Hitler. He says, look, Hitler said, quote, he alone who owns the youth gains the future. And so that's what we're seeing, Karen. I think ultimately this is one prong in a strategy to remake the country from the inside out, starting at the very young. And it's evil and it's nefarious, but you got to say at the same time it's brilliant.
And Karen, you steal the child's innocence, right? I mean, that's what you're trying. I mean, that's what you do, and the beauty of developing and the beauty of innocence. I mean, one thing that you knew when you were younger, or at least what you thought, is that kids have this innocence, they have this imagination, they have this wonder, we call it wonder and splendor, and they get to think, and then they get to develop normally. And sex is not a normal discussion. Look, in the old days, quote unquote, or even in the recent days, if you talk to a child about sex outside of context, I mean, you were a groomer. You were someone that was grooming a child to normalize these sex talks, to normalize ultimately sex act. I mean, look, we keep coming back to Yuri Bezmenov, Karen, and we should. I mean, he was a Soviet defector, speaking of Soviet, and he talked about the 4 stages of ideological subversion. First stage is demoralization, then destabilization, then crisis, and then normalization. See, there's the 4th one. And part of the demoralization is changing up the societal norms about sex, about family, about culture, about what's right and wrong, about what is the ultimate goal in a society or an individual or a citizen within that society. And he believed in 1984, the interview that we keep referencing back, and it's on YouTube for anyone who wants to see it. Maybe Sal or Dom can post it on the Facebook. But he thought in 1984, ironically, it was in 1984, no, not correlating to George Orwell's book, but in 1984, he thought that America was substantially demoralized. And he says it takes 20 years to do that, going back to your 50s and 60s reference to 84. It's interesting. And then once you demoralize, then now you can rewrite the book.
With particular emphasis on education.
Right.
He was focusing on that because using education to change the worldview of kids has always been the goal. Always been the goal. If you look over the last 100 years of totalitarian regimes, that's always been the goal of cultural Marxism. And so we gotta come back to that and not look at this just with grievance eyes, so we're screaming at the sky. But we have to step back and look at this as one prong in a multi-pronged strategy here to unmake the country and detach it from its traditional roots.
But Karen, you brought this up because this happened in Texas, and it's happened all over the country, and you see videos going around. But in Texas and in other states, you have parents going to school board meetings. And look, guys, some of the most important elections are school board elections. Period. End of story. And so they're going to these school board meetings, Saulo, and they're saying, and they're reading books that are assigned to their kids. And the school board members are saying, hold on, that's not appropriate. Hey, you dumbass. You're saying this is appropriate for my kid to read alone and with other students and in their class and to be teaching all of this? But yet I can't read it to you and to this audience? I mean, that's logically inconsistent. And you have to ask why, and they should push back. And then we went through a season in this country where the federal agents were looking at parents as some type of domestic terrorist. And they were examining them and looking at them and questioning their motives. But are you questioning the motives? We'll get into this later, I know, Karen, of Dearborn, Michigan. That is it's Yemen inside the United States, by the way. If you do any studying on Dearborn, Michigan, I mean, they have the chants in public. All of city council is Islamic. And we can talk about that maybe now or another show, why that's a problem when you have a constitution and you have an Islamic-minded person understanding Sharia, understanding the the imperialistic mindset of Islam and the caliph and the caliphate and all that, how that's supposed to be set up and what they're trying to, their objective. But Dearborn, Michigan is not, in my opinion, is not part of the United States anymore. It's been carved out.
I know. It just makes me have a big question mark, like what the heck happened? Going back to kids, I keep on wondering and asking myself, yes, there are the parents that were courageous enough to go before the school boards and say, what the heck are you teaching my kid? But at the same time, I can't ignore the fact that there are some parents who are putting their kids on TikTok. And I'm not talking about letting them watch the videos. I'm talking about letting them be the subject of videos on TikTok, and then and I've just read about this, may take requests like, oh, let's have, little Susie do this. Let's have Susie throw a ball. And in my mind, it's kind of like all of these weirdos and creeps are there watching your child, and you're thinking, oh, everybody likes my little girl, and that underbelly that makes me so sick is, are the parents doing that just to get clicks and likes and, get sponsorship? Because that in itself can be like some bizarre thing.
Yeah, what you're referencing, I think, Karen, and look, and I know that you're on the phone, so if you have to cut us off, just cut us off, because normally you'll look at us or, throw a pen at us.
Oh, wait, we're gonna have to cut off, because I think y'all have to look at Kurt and see if it is time to take a break.
Well, yeah, it is. He's got half of a peace sign up right now. What does that mean, Kurt? What are you talking about?
Yes.
I'm just joking. Yeah.
He's waving at us.
We're going to take a break
what does that mean?
right now, but we will be right back with more on Sidebar. Question, like, isn't it also, I don't know what the word is, it's like when a parent exposes their kids on social media and gets likes, and to me that's a little bit odd too, and I'm wondering if that's not just part of parents being ignorant to know what's out there that's watching their kids on TikTok?
I think it depends, Karen, what the subject. I mean, look, back in my pop's days, you had Shirley Temple. You have these you have these child stars that I think can be appropriate, but then you've seen the horror stories of child stars that have gone off the rails, and they do get involved in sexual activity, just so young, and it just distorts their ideology. And
everybody just turns their head as if it doesn't matter.
But I think there's a warning. I'm sorry, George. I think there is a warning to parents that we have to be careful how we object. I don't think your kids should be objectified at all, but it depends on the object. I mean, I always want to direct my kids back to Christ, even over Davi and my wife and ourselves, because they're developing their worldview, and you got to think about what you're telling them. I have to do something to get either worth or attention. I'm not worthy myself. I have to do something, whether it's sexual, whether it's perform. I mean, our oldest daughter used to try to pull that, flitter your eyes stuff, your eyelashes to you. And the first time she did that, I said, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "What do you mean, Papi?" I go, "What's wrong? What's in your eye?" She goes, "Nothing." I was like, "Well, that's cute, but don't think you're going to get something from that look." And I never want my daughter or any of our kids to think they have to do something. Either you accomplish something with your brain, or with your brawn, meaning your physical, or with your thinking and your logic and your ideas. But you're not going to objectify your eyes. And I get it when it's young and they're cute. I get chula and this and that, and you think that it's cute, and it's fine if you keep it in context. But I didn't want to send that message early on, and maybe I'm just jacked up because of what I do for a living, and I see sex trafficking and how women are objectified and how they're used and sexually assaulted and things of that nature. But I cut that crap off early when we were with our kids, and my wife says, oh, you're overdoing it. Maybe I was. I don't know. But I just want to make sure that our children know that Christ comes first in our household, for us. And number two, whatever you accomplish in life, it's going to be through your physical ability or through your mental ability and through your hard work and your commitment and your integrity, not because of some characteristic physically that you have or some performance you can do.
Right, and it's precisely that mindset that is in the crosshairs right now, Nico. That what you just articulated, which has been the traditional thrust of the concern of parents in the United States. The United States is built on, decidedly and arguably, on a Judeo-Christian view of the nuclear family and how societies are built from the ground up. You have strong homes, strong families, and you will have strong societies, rationally thinking, critically thinking, religious-minded families that then grow up to influence culture and government in the same direction. So what we're seeing right now is a war against that. Yes. It's a well-coordinated effort. I want to quote an MSNBC host, Melissa Harris Perry. Quote, "We have to break through our private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities." Now, obviously, if kids belong to whole communities, then it begs the question, what is the value system of that community? So there's a very different value system out there. There's a man by the name of William Foster, and he is the president of the American Communist Party. And he wrote a book called Towards Soviet America. And here's what he wrote. Among the elementary measures the American Soviet government, he calls it, will adopt to further the Cultural Revolution are the following. The schools, the colleges, and universities will be coordinated and grouped under the National Department of Education. He said the studies will be revolutionized. They will be cleansed of religious, patriotic, and other features of the bourgeois ideology. So, to use Marxist language. So think about that. It's the Department of Education. That's the hub. That's the common denominator. So when we talk about parents and how parents have lost their mind, Karen, parents are people too. And they, right? And so this is a generational game plan. So at some point, what will be the difference, Nico, between the parent and the child in terms of their ability to think rationally?
People need to wake up, because think about what you just said. There's so much that you said there, George, and it was so good. When you talk about children belonging to everyone versus to their parents, now your child has to
Takes
function.
A village.
Well, I get that, but that's taken out of context, right? I mean, yes, it does take a village to raise a child, but it doesn't mean that child belongs to the village. I mean, it functions in the village.
Or that the primary influencer should be the village.
And then you combine that with everything you just said, or that you quoted from that author, is happening today, and we've seen it happening for years now. I mean, I saw a blip up this week of a story where somebody, I don't know if it was a competition, so if you, either one of you know what I'm talking about, correct me, but some group wore American flags as their uniform, outfit, whatever, and it triggered people. The American flag, let that sink in. The American flag, the representation of freedom, of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and everything that that our founding fathers thought of breaking away from a country, from a government that overbear. That's why we have the First, Second, Third, Fourth Amendments, Fifth. I'll go through all of them. The American flag triggers people. Then get the hell out of this country.
Precisely.
I mean, where are they going to go? Where do they think they're going to go?
I could give a crap where they go. I'm just saying, if the American flag triggers you. Now, you can have a different idea of what that means and how America has fallen short. Absolutely. America's not perfect. I'm not here being an apologist for American perfectionists. But I'm just saying the ideas that undergird this country and the freedom that comes along with this to prosper and to grow and to raise and have free thought and free speech and be a huge citizen in a small government so that citizen can thrive. Those ideas are good. Now, you can misuse those ideas things of this nature. But if the flag triggers someone, let that sink in of the rot of the mindset and how kids have been indoctrinated and why that first stage of demoralization applies not only to the nuclear family, but to the fundamental ideas of this country.
Oh.
But it also then makes sense on why they would hate the vision of Trump hugging the flag.
Yes.
Because I never understood that. I was like, well, what's wrong with that? But that
Or of an
makes sense.
Olympian athlete wrapping themselves in the flag, representing their country and the ideas of that country. I mean, I've never seen people hate a country so much within their own country. I mean, Mexico, are you kidding me? I mean, you go to a soccer game, go to a UFC fight, go to any other thing. And I mean, my wife's from Mexico. My in-laws, my suegros still live over there. I mean, they fall over themselves with Mexican pride. Saulo knows this. I mean, I don't know. I can't hear you.
You can't wave another flag in Mexico.
You can't. So Saulo just said, Kurt is his. I think Kurt's going to come in and fix your microphone, Saulo. But Saulo made a point that you can't even wave another flag in Mexico, right? You can't own property in Mexico unless you're a Mexican citizen. Different topic.
At least not without consequences, right?
Yeah. I mean, you go to a UFC fight and talk about Ireland. I mean, with Conor McGregor when he fights. I mean, it's insane. Or the UK for now.
Yep.
Is it back on, Kurt?
Yep.
Right.
Oh, no, you need to put the first 4 mics all the way up and push program. I'm
There you are. See, Karen, what happens when you're not here? Everything goes to hell in a handbasket.
I know. First four microphones all the way up.
So, but think about think about how far along we are into this here. The National Department of Education, not the parents. Again, the National Department of Education, not the parents, are going to set the agenda. They're going to determine what's being taught. And how do they do that? Well, through the use of curricula, obviously. They're gonna cleanse. This is a cleansing of schools.
That's good.
Religious and patriotic influence. You do that through curricula. And so when you have parents at school boards reading these books, they're reading books that the American Library Association has said is okay, and books that are in school libraries and classroom libraries. And so they're reading curricula. They're not reading some book that's out there somewhere. They're reading curricula in that school. And so this very sensitive and formerly sacred topic of sexuality and gender becomes a sort of gateway to the ultimate goal of equality in the genders, in the sexes.
George,
there's nothing sacred about it as far as they're concerned. Go ahead.
Even if you get rid of that aspect of in America, we're still having to deal with like the World Health Organization and their views on when you should start teaching, sexuality or, to children, when it's okay. And they say age 0 to 4 is when you should start teaching.
No, I mean, that's why we say it's a well-coordinated.
Well, that should tell you everything, Karen. I mean, the World Health Organization can go to hell. I mean, that's just ridiculous. 0 to 4. Why would you talk to, first of all, I don't know why you talk to a 6-month-old about sex, but why would you talk to a 4-year-old about sexual intercourse?
Right.
Yeah. Other than saying boys have wee-wees, girls have whatever you want, whatever little word you want to use for a female part there. But I mean, it's kindergarten cop to me.
Yeah.
When a little boy goes up to Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I don't think it's going to get blocked out, but boys have penises, girls have vaginas, and he pulls on his thing. That's a biological fact, right? But then today that's under attack.
Speaking of today, April 13th, a movement that has just started, but I think is getting a lot of traction is the one I was mentioning last time. Don't mess with our kids. It's a national movement, and today from 1 to 3, they're meeting at the capitals, all 50 capitals in the United States today at 1 to 3. It's a movement called "Don't Mess with Our Kids."
Good for them.
And they're calling mamas mama bears in regards to their protective spirit of their kids, that they don't want any sexual education to the kids in elementary school.
Well, but we need Papa Bears too.
Oh, exactly. I agree.
We need grizzly bears. Let's call them grizzly bears, right?
Yeah.
Tell them that you can borrow that. They have mama bears and grizzly bears, and they need to protect that. Because I mean, I love to see these parents go to these school boards and then show the hypocrisy of the ideology. Because it's on full display.
Yeah.
They're reading books and they're explicit. I mean, one of the books talked about giving fellatio to Jesus. You want to talk about offensive. Read a book about that, doing that to Muhammad, and see what the Islamic people do to you. But the hypocrisy is off the chart. The Christians have been castrated because they have no courage. And then we don't stand up and vote and speak and object. I mean, all within appropriate time, with the way we're supposed to, by the way. But I'm just saying, there's got to be a pushback. a societal pushback. So good for this organization. I need you to educate me more on this.
But you know how I said this is grotesque and it's evil what's going on here, and it's pervasive throughout the country. But Nico, I mean, it is disgustingly brilliant in the sense that think about what's happening here. You're stimulating sexual desire in kids. And so that leads to all kinds of completely inappropriate expressions of sexuality that basically end up destroying and defiling their souls. And it starts super early. I pulled up a 2018 report. It's called The Effect of Early Sexual Activity on Mental Health. And then we wonder why kids are behaving the way they're behaving, why they're incapable of having any meaningful interpersonal interaction. No eye contact. They look hollow, as you said. I think you gave that one example a few weeks ago. And so you're basically eroding a child at the core. And I went back to this report because things have only gotten worse. So a 2018 Effect of Early Sexual Activity on Mental Health report evaluated 28 studies of peer-reviewed medical literature from 1966 to the present, and researchers found the following, quote, early sexual debut increased levels of depression, suicidal ideation, aggressive behavior, psychological distress, anxiety, stress, loneliness, poor well-being, regret, guilt, and it also increased negative social behaviors such as substance abuse and risky sexual behavior, to say nothing of violence.
But brother, that is everything that George is saying. I promise you, and I can only speak for Bexar County, but we can look at the data across the country. We're seeing in the justice system today, the cases we're seeing, and even when I was DA, when I was district attorney, and then even as in the defense firm, we're seeing cases involving sexual activity with kids younger and younger. And the things and the cases we're seeing are completely different from a decade ago, and for sure when 2 decades ago when I first started practicing law. That study is as accurate.
Okay, there's the music. We are going to take a break. We will be right back with more on Sidebar.
This is News Radio 1200 WOEL.
For listening every week. This is Sidebar. You can join us on social media platform live And in person at sidebartv.com.
In person? Who's talking about in person? I'm a studio audience.
Well, you can actually see who got ready for the morning and who didn't.
Oh.
Thank goodness I'm not there today. You know what? One of the topics we said that we were going to discuss this morning, of course, is death to America, then, death to the family, but there is something that happened in Kansas. Nico, do you know the details of it?
Yeah, it's I'm glad you brought that up, Karen, because, a Kansas governor vetoed a bill that would ban transgender treatment to minors, and then, of course, put abortion restrictions. So think about, let's critically think through that idea. So the Kansas governor, Laura Kelly, vetoed a bill that would stop these transgender treatments and transitioning procedures to children. Think about that. But yet, the parent can end the life of the child in the womb to whatever point.
Right.
But yet, is going to be able to change can't stop them from transitioning your child. The ideas and the logic is so inconsistent. So you have children that can't vote. We've talked about this before. They can't smoke. They can't even not go to school. They can't drive. Certain children, if you're not a certain height, you can't fly a plane, be on a plane by yourself. You can't do crap. You can't live by yourself. There's nothing a child can do. Why? Because they're not ready for it. Psychologically, mentally, for us, we'll say spiritually. They can't even consent to sex. In Texas, I'll speak for Texas. I don't want to speak for Kansas, but every state is similar. If you are under 17, you are not legally able to consent to sex unless there's a high school rule exception in Texas, unless you're within 3 years from the other person. So a 13-year-old can consent with a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old, a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. But outside of that 3 years, you are not, even if they logically consented, not even logically, even if they factually consented, they can't legally consent. So you can't even consent to sex, but you can consent and you can't stop them from changing their gender. Think of that. Or taking these pills, and we know, because I think I circulated that study that George has been talking about for some time now, that they see the effects of these procedures and this medication that these kids are taking, and they have long lifetime effects.
Yeah, there's no question. It's an overwhelming amount of social research right now. We've had probably 20, 25 years of research that's been done to show that individuals that, first of all, it shows that the children that basically or go through any kind of gender confusion tend to outgrow that. The number's insanely high. It's in the 90s in terms of the percentage of young kids.
And is that how it's called? It's called gender confusion in these studies?
Yeah, right, exactly. Gender confusion is a generic term. Kids that experience that by overwhelming majorities tend to outgrow it in adulthood. And so it's simply a matter, again, of a parent being a parent and sort of coaching a kid through that confusion. But when the parent's part of the problem, what do you do? When the government's part of the problem, what do you do? When society at large is part of the problem, what do you do? We have this is the problem. You're trying to make a moral appeal, a rational appeal, to a culture that has largely lost its ability to think rationally. And in certain cases, we've got just an outright fractured conscience, Nico, where we've lost the ability to make moral value judgments. And the government, again, is encouraging that. And so what do we do? Where do we go to? And it should be the church, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say that.
But the church is caving on these issues. The church is also getting hollowed out on these issues. That's the degree of moral confusion that we're dealing with right now. And so I'm glad we're having this discussion, and I'm glad, Karen, that we're taking it beyond just the complaint. Nico can speak for himself on this, but I think it's good that we don't join the outrage machine, that we don't show up on Saturday, and we don't do this. What we don't do on Sidebar is just show up and complain. We don't show up and join the outrage. I know that Salo's looking at me, and I know it gets clicks, but we got to do better than that. We got to say, here is what's really going on. This is a coordinated, it's a deliberate, well thought out machinery. And we have to counter crappy ideas with really good ideas, right, Nico? We got to counter a strategy with another strategy. We can't just rail against the machine. We can't scream at the sky. We can't just complain. So it's important that we peel back these layers and we try to explain to people, Nico, that there's a worldview, there's an ideology behind this, and it's got at least a century of of being tested and true. It works at destroying whole societies and communities. And we cannot let that happen. And the best way to push back is to understand what it is that we're dealing with.
Don't you think that, I was just going to say, don't you think that with everything that's going on under the Biden administration, whether it be inflation or the cost of living, it always turns out that Trump's views on abortion seem to creep their way all the way to the top. And I'm wondering, you're talking about these are ideas that are trying to change America. Yes, abortion is a huge issue, but is that the number one issue with voters? Why does it keep creeping up to the top? And recently he made a comment about abortion, and it seemed like everyone, both sides, were trying to focus on what he said. Why is that?
No, I think. Look, can we sort of pivoting this, because I know the issues are related, Nico, but I think that the Trump statement on abortion was politically brilliant. I mean, he completely neutered, I think, in one statement, in my view, I don't think I'm overstating it, I think he's neutered the Democratic talking points on abortion, because Trump recognizes the empirical realities here. He realizes that when the issue is turned to the voters are about split on this. It's about 50-50. This is an unfortunate, tragic reality. It's just reality. And Trump's living in the real world. And so when we get into conversations about 15-week bans and 20-week bans and 6-week bans, I mean, I know how I feel about abortion. I mean, do I think there should be a federal ban on it? With the exception of a legitimate clinical life of the mother being at play? Yeah, I do. But is that going to happen anytime soon? There's not a chance in hell that's going to happen.
That's why you understand Carrie Lake's what she was saying the other day. She got a lot of pushback because she started saying we need to consider when the mom is her health is in risk and rape situations. Because Carrie Lake started talking about that and she got a lot of pushback. Do you think it was a strategic move in saying, you know what, let's meet in the middle. Let's not be extremist.
The problem with Carrie Lake, though, is that I think she's been more excessive on that. She's been more black and white. She's left much less wiggle room in the way she has argued for bans than Trump has. And so it makes her look like, because Trump said something, now she's totally abandoning where she's been. And so I think Carrie Lake's a little bit different. Trump's been more, you know how Trump is. Trump's been more, let's have a conversation about this. He's been more about trying to find out where people, and this is where Trump's approach generally, Nico. He finds out where the majority of people are, try to find sort of a working position, and then takes incremental steps forward rather than giant leaps. And that's what he's doing here. Trump is basically saying the following: I'm going to go back to Dobbs, which is really going back to pre-1973.
Right.
We're going to go back to the states. Morally, I think that that's an untenable position. And the reason why he's catching health and pro-life organizations is because, and I think this is where he fell down a little bit on the statement. Nico and I were going back and forth on this in the text. I wish he would have said, look, personally, I think this can't stand. I think ultimately America is going to have to reconcile that there's a huge gap between what the Declaration of Independence says about the importance of preserving life as an unalienable right of every person and where we are. This can't stand. But the reality is we are where we are. And he did say that. People are where they are. But then he says you got to follow your heart. That's exactly the wrong message. We don't want, following our heart is exactly what got us where we are in terms of abortion. Right. I don't think he should have used that language. I know what he meant. Nico actually explained it well. He said, I think he's using heart in the sense of the conscience.
Yeah, I think he was referring to the conscience. Look, I mean, this is a topic that Republicans really have to get their head around.
Check out Carlos' comment in regards to what Karen was saying. It keeps creeping up because Democrats know that they can use it to trigger weak-minded people. Then the right talks about more than enough to complete the trigger pull. It's a brilliant strategy by the Dems, and the right falls for it.
Well, look, yes, it's true, but we still have to be the conservative. I don't know right, left. I don't like right. But I mean, the conservative needs to be able to talk about it. And I think, George, when we were talking this week, or going back and forth, you brought up Abraham Lincoln's example of slavery.
I've seen the analogy brought up in the Lincoln-Douglas debate.
I thought that was a good. That was a good analogy, and I think that the moral clarity Trump should have brought, I think that's where he fell short. I understand what you were saying. But when he said follow your heart, I think he meant ultimately you have to follow your conscience. I mean, which is a biblical position to take. Look, you're the one that's going to be standing before the Lord. You got to toil with that yourself.
If we can park on what you just said for a second, and Karen, please weigh in. I hope I'm not talking over you in any way. This is the problem. Trump's recognizing, hey, guys, it isn't my fault that we've lost the battle over the last 6 decades.
Yeah.
And now you're asking me to basically solve it rhetorically and otherwise in 6 months?
Yeah, in a week.
Come on, give me a break here. So Trump recognizes that in order for us to get back to political and moral clarity, we got to do this thing called winning elections. We have to get political power back to be able to start influencing the machinery that got us to where we are right now, where we are. Look, you'd mentioned conscience. It doesn't make me feel any better to distinguish between conscience and the heart here, because especially since they're using
we just talked about how society doesn't have a conscience, so I get it.
But if society's got a fractured conscience on this, and I'm sorry, we do. We're morally confused about this. And so when DeSantis comes out with his 15-week, or Lindsey Graham, comes out with the 15-week proposed federal ban, that's putting the cart for the horse, Lindsey. That people are going to get caught up on the numbers when at the very most fundamental level, they're confused about whether these kids are actually persons.
But see,
we're still stuck there.
But see, this is it. This is not a topic where you can win in sound bites, because the other side's going to win. This has to be unpacked, and maybe we'll do that on the after show for sure. But it needs to be unpacked, and they have to think about how to better position themselves on this discussion and educate people, because you're not going to get people to vote. Right now, it's about reproductive rights. They've changed it from...
They win the sidebar.
They got that. Forget, it's not abortion anymore. It's reproductive rights. And so they're making it about the mom and all that things. And look, we have to distinguish and look at it from the child's point of view. What I always try to bring people back to, and it happened here locally, when the local DA made a comment, and everybody, obviously criticized him on it. It was talking about a capital murder of the Soto case. And there was a capital murder of the two parents but then there also could be a separate capital murder charge for what the verbiage was used for the unborn child. And that's how the Penal Code, and we can talk about this after break, that's how the Penal Code addressed it. So the discussion needs to be had. Conservatives need to be better about this, and you can't win this argument in sound bites. I know we got to go to break, Karen.
Okay, yeah. We will be right back with more on Sidebar.
With reputations as respected high-level...
On the air on WOAI, and we will continue the conversation. All you have to do is go to sidebartv.com. You can join us on many platforms, including Facebook and a whole bunch more.
X and YouTube.
X.
Who was playing, George?
Please play.
The music when we went in. When we came back, who was playing?
It sounded like Betty Davis eyes, wasn't it?
Wow.
Bonnie Raitt. No, it's not Bonnie Raitt. Who is it? Bonnie Tyler.
Betty Davis eyes, right, Kurt?
Kim Carnes.
Kim Carnes.
That is so true.
What was the name of the song? Betty Davis eyes.
Betty Davis eyes. No, yes, Betty Davis eyes.
Dude. Anyway, are we going to talk about O.J. Simpson? I'm sorry.
O.J. Simpson.
No, I'm joking.
Seriously?
I hope the wings fit. When he gets to heaven, I hope his wings fit.
Heaven? Who said he's going to heaven? Who knows? I don't know about that. I don't know if you were them. No, I thought, George, on break you brought something up that was really good about what Trump did with this issue with abortion. George was saying, and it needs to be repeated, that Trump neutered this situation because the image that the Democrats and the left is putting out there is that women are going to be dying in back alley of
That's right.
attempted illegal abortions, and it's women reproductive rights. And Trump just said, look, we're not going to solve this issue here, which is right. You can't expect me to solve decades of us fumbling the ball on this issue because of mismanagement of messaging. And then guess what? It's going back to the states. You guys figure it out, which is what Dobbs really said. To talk about losing the PR war on that case.
And we have 6 decades, and I wish Patrick was here because it would be important to talk a little bit about the law. We have 6 decades where we have an interpretation of the 14th Amendment that actually talks about persons, all persons.
Right.
An interpretation of the 14th Amendment that denies the unborn personhood. And Trump's saying, 6 decades of this stuff, and you want me to fix this now?
Right.
By declaring a federal ban when still at least 50% of the country is confused about whether a woman is actually giving birth to a person.
But they're not confused about capital murder. But keep going. This is my point.
No, but I think what you said, the penal code does, in fact, interestingly, this is how confusing this is.
Yes.
This is, and you've brought this up, there's a huge contradiction, and we damn well better do something about it, or because we're getting ripped apart on it.
Yep.
The acknowledgement of personhood is actually in the penal code.
That's what I tell people. I don't start from my Christian view when I defend pro-life position. I said, can I just shelf my faith for a second? And if someone's not a person of faith, they're like, hell yeah, you can, sure. Yeah. And I said, okay, well, the penal code says this. If you murder a woman that's pregnant, do you know why the person that allegedly commits the murder faces death? Death. The most severe penalty in our justice system. Because they murdered 2 people? Great answer, by the way, because if you murder 2 people in the same incident, yes, you could face death. So you're saying the person inside the womb is a person? Okay, well, let's decide that. But that's not what the statute says. The penal code says that you murdered, listen to me, a child under 10 years old. So the penal code puts the same value of that child in the womb to an 8-year-old that's out of the womb, or a 10 or 9-year-old, or a 7-year-old, or a 6-month-old, or whatever, fill in the blank. Puts them on equal footing. Now, what do you do with that? Look, you have to contend with that, because I don't know people that advocate for pro-choice, and I love to talk about this lovingly, but also courageously. I don't know people that are advocating for pro-choice that are going to the state legislatures saying, hey, change the capital murder statute. If you murder a pregnant woman, no, it shouldn't be death penalty. It should be ag assault, causing serious bodily injury, which is a second-degree felony versus a capital case. 2 to 20 versus life or death. Yeah. I mean, huge difference. So I'm looking for consistencies or inconsistencies in ideology, but nobody does that, though, is my point. And so I think what Trump is saying is like I think that's good, George. To your point, he's saying, look, guys, we're losing on this issue until you figure your crap out. Let's just take it back to the states, which is it's constitutionally appropriate. Go back to the states, let the citizens, and then work on advocating in your own state. And then re-educate people and really
let's get political power. And this is why I think the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and in this way
on slavery,
and why the analogy of slavery. Think about that. Let's not talk about abortion for a moment. Let's talk about slavery. How acceptable would it be to say, because this is where we were
back in 1865, right?
Well, let's just let slavery be a matter for the states. Obviously, it was a matter for some states and not others. Was that acceptable? Of course, it was not acceptable, but it was the reality. And Lincoln knew that he couldn't ban that with a wave of the hand. But at the same time, he said, and he acknowledged that political reality, but at the same time, he said, slavery is completely untenable. There's no way in hell you can make the claim that you're committed to the ethos of the Declaration of Independence and then say, well, we'll just leave slavery to the states. That's grotesque. It's also rationally inconsistent and morally inconsistent. I think that's where we are with abortion.
I think it's a great analogy.
And Trump is, and I don't think he did it as well as Lincoln.
No,
because Lincoln didn't mince words when it came to the evil of slavery. He absolutely put his foot down and said, this is unacceptable. It is untenable. It is grotesque. This cannot stand. And at some point, it will not stand. Trump should say the same thing. But for now, there's no way I'm getting behind a federal ban right now. What's the point? People are not on board. They're confused about it. They've been confused since the aftermath of the 1970s. What did the court say in 1973?
Nobody knows.
What was the outcome of that ruling? The court said that a woman's right to privacy prevails over the state's interest in regulating abortion. That's what they went. That's what they concluded with. and then abortion became legal in all 50 states. Think about that. The right to privacy. The only way the right to privacy prevails over a state's interest in regulating abortion is if that child is not a person. That's the point. And so, can you imagine if that is a person, then what you're saying is that you have the right to privately murder a child.
And they even said
you can't privately murder somebody. So the only reason the right to privacy prevails is because the child is not a person. The court even said at any time, if the child is ever deemed to be a person, this whole thing falls apart. And that's where we need to go. And it ain't going to happen in 5 minutes.
We didn't have sonograms back then the way we have them today. Not like we have today.
Right.
We didn't know.
Not as widespread.
That's my point.
Not with the resolution we have today.
In the court's ruling, it established the pitfall for their ruling. They said if that child, what did they call? Did they call it a child? Didn't say. Did they say
it was a potential human life.
Potential human life becomes a child.
Right.
Then this whole ideology falls apart. And that's all it said.
Right,
Dobbs corrected that. That's it.
And I'm going to find the language right here. I think I have it handy. Something to the effect of, if the right to personhood is established, the right of personhood is established, the, quote, appellant's case, of course, collapses. For the fetus's right to life is then guaranteed specifically by the 14th
And that's
Amendment.
in Roe v. Wade. Yeah.
That's right. So the pro-abortion position is basically dependent on the belief that the unborn is not an actual human person. And we've spent, Nico, we have 50 years of case law doubling down on this stupidity.
Which is why that's inconsistent with the capital murder statutes. That's my point.
No, you're right.
Because the capital murder statutes acknowledges a child personhood, and that's why that person and that child should be protected, aside from the mom.
Right.
It's not the murder of two people, which is an argument
and
in
we just
itself.
got done saying that we are nowhere near in control of the Department of Education.
That's right.
So Trump is saying, hello, how about everybody just take a deep breath?
Yeah.
How about we actually get to a place where we have the political power necessary to start influencing this machinery? Top of the list, the Department of Education, where we actually start influencing what people are taught, so that we can actually start making a dent on how they're processing this information, on how they're looking at human life. How about we actually get control of the Department of Education to the point where classrooms are actually reading the damn Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States?
How about we
do
win
that?
some school board races first and make sure the kids aren't talking about oral sex and anal sex
and that's what Trump is
to
saying.
your 5-year-old or whatever. That's 100%.
So pro-life advocates that are out there throwing the president under the bus, I just have one simple question for them. Fine. Let's say you're right. Please tell me how Biden's an improvement. I mean, honestly, come on. I mean, we've lost our ability.
I agree.
I don't get it.
Like sometimes conservatives are their own worst enemies. Because if you don't agree, here's your 10 points. It's the same ideology on the left. I mean, if you're not Democrat enough, and then you're not Republican enough, and then you don't have all 10 points exactly the way we want you to have them, then kick you out. And they don't understand, the enemy of good is great, whatever it is, great is good. I mean, we have to make improvements. Trump's position on this is a practical one. I mean, George, you and I have been very open about our positions. We're very pro-life. Again, understanding that the protection of the mom's health it cannot be ignored. Aside from that, and we can talk about on the after show about
And a question too. Elizabeth says, can you address the argument from the left that conservatives are hypocritical by supporting the death penalty?
Oh God, can we address that after?
Yeah.
We have
Elizabeth,
3 minutes. No. But Elizabeth,
after
please join
show.
in. I promise we'll address that because that's an easy one because you're talking about the spilling of innocent blood versus the spilling of blood. So yes, we can address that on the after show. That's a great question, by the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very good.
Should we also then decide state by state on what should be done to people that say death to America?
Look, I mean, Karen, thanks for circling us back to that because think about that statement. Well, first of all, it's not surprising in Dearborn, Michigan, because I like I said earlier in the show, Dearborn, Michigan is not part of the United States anymore. I mean, people just need to understand that, and all you have to do, first of all, go visit it. Secondly, just study it and understand that. And if you don't think that those Islamic communities are, and I'm not saying this. Look, it's nothing wrong. I have a lot of friends that are Muslim, Islamic, or whatever. It's the ideology that someone's trying to advocate. That's all I'm saying. I mean, if study Sharia law. If anyone that's advocating Sharia law is not supporting the Constitution. Period. End of story. It's in direct conflict. And when Ben Carson, by the way, and we can talk about this on the after show, When Ben Carson years ago, he took so much flack. Do you remember that?
I do.
When he said a Muslim cannot be the president of the United States, he was talking ideologically. And he wasn't incorrect if you think about ideologically what the Islamic mindset and what is being pushed under Islam and understanding caliphate and caliphs and the Sharia law and all this stuff and the hadiths. You have to understand what he was saying. He had a deeper understanding ideologically. It doesn't mean someone can't have the title of being an Islamic and be the president of the United States. It's can you be pushing and understanding the ideology? And so you just have to understand that it's very, very different worldview about how women are treated, this and that, things. It's just very different. And all you have to do is study Yemen or Afghanistan or any Saudi Arabia. And that's not a shot. I mean, like I said, I have a lot of Islamic friends. But it's about ideas. We're looking at the ideas in school. We're looking on the ideas of how to run government and civic government. We're looking at the ideas of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And anything that sets itself underneath that is anti-American. Any idea that sets itself up against the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, I think by definition is anti-American. Would you disagree?
Of course. Yeah, that's right.
You would disagree or you would not disagree?
No, I would agree with you.
Okay.
That Constitution is supreme law of the land, and any ideology any ideology that is directly in opposition to it can't stand.
George, can we finish? Because we have 20 seconds, and I know Karen's right here. If she was in front of us, she'd be saying, "Look at her."
Wrap it up.
I know. We have 20 seconds. George, don't lose your thought. We're going to start the after show with what George was about to say. We'll answer Elizabeth's question. We'll address other questions. I think this show will take questions and answer. Guys, thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the show. Share it with someone that you think may benefit from these conversations and critical thinking. Have a blessed weekend.
The preceding show was...
We're live.
Are we live?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Live. Alamo Talk says, since on the topic of the Bible and Christianity, has anyone had a chance to read the Trump Bible?
I think it's just a regular Bible.
I think he's making holiness great again. That's what I heard. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, the Trump Bible is just what I don't know what version it is. It's just the Bible.
I think it's King James.
It's just a King. I think it's a New King James or old, or just King
I
James.
think it's King James.
Huge.
I think it's a King James.
Huge verses. Huge.
It's just a signed Bible. It's not a big deal. I mean, I don't know why people are freaking out over that. I mean, why wouldn't you want Bibles sold? I mean, that's
yeah. If it triggers for people to get a Bible, that's awesome.
This is a stupid shit we argue about.
I know.
Though.
Yes,
It's so
Really?
ridiculous.
We actually have time and the presence of mind to talk about stuff like this?
I mean, we're not
the
taking
world's
shots
on fire.
at the question. Alamo, thank you for asking that question. I know that this is not directed to you, but aside from the question, people were criticizing Trump for selling a Bible. I was like, what the hell? What are you talking about?
Right. Yeah. The world's on fire. We have no border. We have no border. Little boys don't know if they're girls, and little girls don't know if they're girls. But Trump signed a Bible.
Yeah. And he was holding a Bible in front of that church a few months back.
Did you for our brother and sisters who believe in the Christian worldview and faith? I mean, have you listened to his quote unquote Easter message every time he's president? It's beautiful. I mean, it's appropriate. Or the Christmas messages?
Very.
I mean, they're biblically sound.
Yeah.
And I don't look. I'm not voting for him to be my pastor.
No.
But
No.
I mean, he's advocating truth. I mean,
Yeah.
biblical truth, and he's standing for it. And I had a discussion with a buddy of mine the other day. He's like, I don't know if I'm going to vote for Trump. I may vote for Bobby Kennedy. He's a conservative. I said, well, that's. And he goes, I know, it's a non-vote. And I said, have you looked at his VP? I mean, I know Bobby. And I say, I'm not just. I know Bobby. I mean, I've advocated with him in D.C. over medical freedom and stuff like that, and educating people on informed consent and what that really means. But I agree with Bobby on a lot of things, but I'm not voting for him, and I don't say that to be mean.
Yeah.
I love Bobby, but I've already committed to voting for Trump and the ideas and his policies that he's setting forth. And I said, but if you looked at the VP, how left, he said, no, I didn't know about that. And I said, look, you don't have to like Trump, because he's read all these books on Trump and from the niece and his brother's daughter's book, and I think he's a bad person. I think he tried to screw people in business. And I said, okay, I don't know. I haven't looked into that. And even if that's true, does that mean that he shouldn't be the president for this season? I go, sometimes the choice isn't between great and bad. It's bad and better. And can you sit there and there's a reason why Trump is raising in the polls with Americans that are black, Americans that are Hispanic, with even urban women, with young people. I mean, he's raising the polls for a reason, because America's going to shit. I just said it like that. I mean, and he goes, you know what? You're right, man. I mean, maybe you're right. I'm edging more and more to it. There's a reason why Joe Rogan.
I'm glad you said that.
I had to. I mean, but it's true. I mean, I wasn't trying to be mean. We were just talking as buddies over lunch.
We could do the same thing, and it's not a one for one. But the type of argument he's making is, so there were all kinds of questionable reports on his uncle about John F. Kennedy. Are you kidding me?
What are you talking about?
In other words, questionable moral acts by John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
Does that mean he should not have been president of the United States at that time?
Right.
Absolutely not.
Right.
In fact, if John F. Kennedy was running, I'd probably be voting for him.
Right.
Given the things that he advocated for at the time. I mean, I think if you look at the things he advocated for, he was much more conservative than he was a liberal, certainly by today's standards.
The Democrat Party invited it.
Right.
Then.
We have 4 years of Trump. Again, it's real simple. What, by way of policy, did Trump advocate for?
Well, that's what I ended on, George.
Yeah.
I said, look,
how else are you supposed to do that?
I said, buddy, I won't say his name, but I said, we actually have a 4-4 horse race. You have 4 years of Biden. You have 4 years of Trump. Now it's not theoretical. Just now make your decision. That's it.
And Bobby can probably find all kinds of problems, things that he disagreed with. But if he's got to pick between the kind of administration that we have with Biden and the kind of administration we have with Trump, and what does he have more common ground with?
Yeah.
Where can he see himself negotiating or championing the things that matter to him the most? Is it with a Biden or is it with a Trump?
These are the conversations, Saulo, that we need to have with people.
Yeah.
Loving conversations, but just educated conversations and encourage dialogue. Not like, what the fuck are you talking about? Are you out of your mind? And this yelling and this cutting people off and this canceling and all this, and people are afraid of being canceled.
Yeah. Don says, can you speak to the fact that Joe Biden is supposed to be a Catholic and is for abortion? Why isn't anyone mentioning that? How can you be a Catholic and be for abortion? And somebody says that apparently the priest won't allow him to take communion because of his stance on abortion.
Yeah, look, I've said this last week. I think it was Don. I don't think President Biden's a Catholic. I don't think he's a Christian.
Much less a devout Catholic.
I don't. I mean, I'm not saying that.
Or aware.
Well, yeah, but even before, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. All I can do is make assessments. Jesus says, judge a tree by its fruit. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say, right? Luke 6, Luke 9. I mean, so it's over and over in there. So it's if we say we believe something, our behavior should be evidence that we believe it. If I say that George is my friend and my brother, then the evidence should be clear that George is my friend and my brother, and I'm not going to talk behind his back. I'm not going to try to scheme behind his back. I'm not going to try to do this. I'm not going to be disrespectful. I'm going to appreciate it. But I'm go down the list of what we claim a good friendship calls for. So I just look for evidence. But the Bible asks us to look for evidence, and there's no evidence that President Biden is a Catholic or Christian. But aside from that, that's between him and the Lord, by the way. I hope he is. I hope he read. But you were making a point, and I didn't mean to cut you off, George, but I don't know. Can you remember what point you were making? When it was 20 seconds and Karen was cussing at us.
I think we were transitioning to this. I hate using that word, But I think we were transitioning to what's
somebody
going on
made a
in
comment.
Dearborn.
Amy says a Muslim cannot be POTUS because Islam wouldn't prevent them from taking the oath of office.
True. I mean but that's
Well, dude, that's where I was going.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Talk
Good,
about
thanks, Amy.
What's
Go ahead.
happening? What happened in Dearborn, Michigan?
ahead.
This is on April 5th.
Go ahead.
In celebration of Al-Quds Day, which goes back to the Iranian Revolution under the Ayatollah Khomeini. If that tells you the roots of Al-Quds Day, it's one giant orgy of victimhood and hatred for Israel, and by extension, hatred for America. Now I say the very same people who are saying death to Israel are saying death to America.
Yes.
So, I asked you the question over text this past week. How the hell did we get here? How in the hell did we get here? We literally have lost. I think we've lost Michigan. I think we've lost Michigan.
The whole state.
Yeah, I worry about it. I think we've definitely lost Dearborn.
Oh, Dearborn's done. Yeah.
I worry that we've lost Michigan. Although I have to say that because Biden is not as insane as the Dearborn marchers, and it was thousands of them from what I saw, they're saying they're not going to vote for him, which is great. I'll take that. But so what he's doing is he's trying to placate them. Now, the only way these people would ever be happy is if Biden dropped a missile in Tel Aviv. Yeah. That's never going to happen. So then he takes these insufferable positions of demanding an immediate ceasefire and trying to cut Israel off at the legs, and perhaps threatening not to send aid to Israel and that kind of thing. And so Biden is recognizing, Nico, that he can't afford to lose votes because he is absolutely hemorrhaging among minorities. He is hemorrhaging among black voters. He's hemorrhaging among Hispanics, particularly men, Asians, virtually any minority category. He is absolutely hemorrhaging. If you look at horizontal analyses and you look at data going back to, let's say, 2008, Gallup had support, basically Democrat-leaning minority voters in 2008 were at about 90%. And today it's at about 66%. That's a significant drop. And those numbers started dropping in the advent of Trump. Trump has been effective at bringing those people over, and he continues to be effective. But look, you see the same thing with Hispanics. You see the same thing with Asians. But look at the why.
The why is we have over 10 million illegal aliens in this country, number one. We're seeing that they're not assimilating and that they're not, we don't know what the hell they're bringing over from disease to sickness to ideology to whatever, but to danger. Not all of them. Yes. I get it. We're not saying all of them. No one said all of them. But it doesn't matter all of them. You don't want nice homeless people in your house? No, because you don't know who they are. So you have that. And then you have the world is in disarray. This is what happens when you have a weak America. If you're going to be called the world leader, act like a world leader. And then Biden, he'll just get. I just saw a clip this morning where he's squinting. That squint, it says a lot, but he squints in the camera and says to Iran, "Don't, just don't." What the shit? You said that last time, and everybody said, "What did he say?" Doesn't even know what he's talking about. Don't what? Don't change my this. Don't do this. What are you talking about? Don't. And I'm trying not to be snarky about it, but it just irritates the shit out of me. No one gives a shit about his don't. They care more about the American machine than the American president. Let's say that again. The world, our world enemies care more about the American machine than the American president because they know what the machine can do when it's unleashed. But not the president. They could give two shits about Biden.
Not at all.
And that's a fact, whether you're Democrat or Republican. And I'd rather you say, I'm still voting Democrat because I believe in these ideas, but I want someone other than Biden. No one can defend Biden as president. And they tried to on MSNBC and they tried to on CNN, and they have the same bullshit talking points.
It is.
And they just parrot them. And if they ever allow themselves to get into a discussion and then said, what do you mean by that? How'd you get to this conclusion? They would fumble over themselves and stutter because they can't support it. It's just talking points that they distribute out, and then everybody repeats and parrots.
And that acknowledgement of this horrid weakness in this president, you could see it in a rally, and things really took a dark turn when this guy Tariq Bazi, he's the one that you
in
sent
Dearborn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
Just tying this idea of acknowledging the weakness of Biden and how they're basically taking advantage of it. They believe that they can get what they want by talking in this way. In the process, by trying to threaten Biden electorally, you can actually see the rot interestingly, in Dearborn, Michigan. And this guy comes up to the microphone. This is Tarek Bazi. Quote, we've been asked in the past why our protests on the International Day of Quds, why they are so anti-America. Why don't we just focus more on Israel, people say, and not talk so much on America? Well, Gaza has shown the entire world why these protests are so anti-America, he says. And then he goes on to say about how we are the most rottenest country in the world. And so we live, he says, in one of the rottenest countries that has ever existed on earth. And then he brings up Malcolm X. And he goes on and talks about how we are the backbone of all oppression in the world. To which I say, then what the fuck are you doing here, man?
I was just going to say, get the fuck out of here. I mean, I was going to let you finish. Here's the deal. There's two things. Then you have to ask yourself, if you think this country is what you described, then why are you here unless it's to take over? It's not to assimilate. It's because you think this country is disgusting and you want to change it from the inside out. That's right. Called domination. That's what they're doing. If you think that about America, get the fuck out of here, number one. Then I think anybody should. That's right. It's common sense. Listen to the venom.
If we're all about exploitation and we're all about humiliation.
They're here to take over. That's why, George.
They're
here to take over. It's not that, I think this wonderful opportunity. There's like, you guys suck nuts and we're going to take over you people and we're going to change you from the inside out. And if any government official, Democrat or Republican, is not looking at this and doesn't understand the issue of the ideology, this is my point. It's not about the label. Forget Islamic, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Christian. Get deeper in the ideology and what the result of those ideas are going to be, because there's consequences to everything, good and bad. That's what these people don't belong in this country.
It gets better. And this is the only point of agreement, that they want Biden to go. And I agree with that. He needs to go, but not for the reasons they're saying.
Yeah.
So they're saying, so when they say Genocide Joe has got to go, yes, he's got to go. He's going to go from the White House. Pretty soon he'll go from this world as well. But then who comes next? This is what Malcolm X was talking about when he spoke of the Republican wolf and the Democrat fox. They're both out to get you. They're both against you. So they have the system fixed so that either way you turn, you're trapped, you're caught, until you can wake up and realize that it's not Genocide Joe that has to go. It's the entire system.
See, that's my point. I didn't know he said that. That's exactly.
I want to know, how the hell is this not seditious behavior?
100%.
Where's the FBI? Maybe they're going after all those white supremacists.
No, they're mad at
those
the mom reading that
school boards called parents.
No, but this is exactly, this is the point behind this, people. This is why this ideology can never be president. This is why this ideology has no place in America. There's no reason. They want the whole system to be replaced. And what I would ask him, I wish I was in a debate with this guy. What do you want to replace it with? Right. He's going to say Sharia. Right. He has to say Sharia. That's exactly what it is. Exactly. And so you have to understand, in an Islamic mindset, there's three books. So there's the Quran, there's the Hadiths, and there's many Hadiths, and then there's Sirah. And you have to understand what they are and what they mean. And then there's Sharia that is supported. And that is how every civic government is set up. And if you don't know what Sharia is, you better wake up and study it really quickly when you understand that. And I have discussions with Islamic friends that we have a tremendous respect for, and I go back and I push back and forth. And some of these people, I used to be Christian. One guy I got in a discussion with, I used to be Christian, and what he ended up describing is not a problem with the ideas of Christianity. He ran into a dickhead that called him a Christian. That's always the problem.
Okay.
I read, that's bullshit. That's Christianity. No, that's what we call a dickhead. That's the violation of the 11th commandment. It's in Exodus somewhere. Don't be a dickhead. It's somewhere in there. And so that's the problem. So that was his objection initially. And when I got into the ideas that undergirded Christianity, what Christ taught and what it really means, he really had no objection to that. So he shifted over to Islam. But then when I pushed him about Islam under Hadiths and Sirah and Sharia, he said, I don't agree with that, because he was still American at heart. He had those American values. And I said, then you need to think about this. I don't know who you're going to pray to, but you need to really think about this on why you shifted over to Islam. And then I got into a discussion with another buddy who is Islamic and Christian, because one of his family members was Muslim and another family was Christian, and they've merged it. Well, then you're not Islam anymore and you're not Christian anymore. You're making up your own religion, which is what really Muhammad tried to do. If you really 100%. Study from early on, is what he tried to do, and why they used to bow to, Medina at first. not for before Mecca, and why he tried to appeal to the people of the book, which were Jews and Christians, which he was 500-600 years after Christ. And then you look at the Quran early on versus the abrogated portions later on, and why there seems to be this shift in
You don't mean that
ideology.
he bowed to Medina? He was exiled basically to Medina and spent quite a bit of time
they
there
bow,
before
right now
the siege on Mecca.
The Muslim people bow five
now
times
they
to
do.
where?
Mecca.
To Mecca, right?
Now,
But
yeah.
what I'm saying is back then they used to bow to Jerusalem early
Correct.
on. So I misspoke. Thank
Yeah,
you, George,
okay.
for the correction. He used to bow to Jerusalem early on, and because they were trying to make an appeal to the people of the book. Study the history. That's all I
It's
tell
true.
people to do.
Yeah, no, that's right. So he
Misspeaking.
lived
Thank
from
you.
570 to about 632 AD, and you can see it until Muhammad gained political power.
He wasn't nice anymore.
His approach was very, very different. Let's put it that way. I think a lot of people don't recognize that a lot of what comprises the theology for Sharia law, Islamic law, is not itself in the Quran. It's, as you said, in the Hadith.
It's hadith.
And the Hadith basically makes up the tradition, the stories about Muhammad,
Right.
and really a small sliver, only about theologically, doctrinally, about 14% of Islamic doctrine actually comes from the Quran, and most of it actually comes from the Hadith.
Right.
About 26%, and I'm just simply counting words and doctrinal words. About 26% of that of Islamic doctrine comes from what's called the Sirah, which is the life of Muhammad.
Autobiography of it.
And then the rest, the overwhelming amount, something like 60% comes from the Hadith, the traditions. There's a book out there called The Reliance of the Traveler, where traveler is spelled with 2 L's. It's written by Nuhamin Keller. And it's pretty fascinating how it breaks up Sharia law by category. So you can literally go from women's rights, homosexuals, on and on down the road, and what the proper response is for an Islamist. And it ain't pretty. That's Islamic law. So when you ask the question, when you would ask the question of this guy in Dearborn, what would you replace it with? It would be Sharia law.
Sharia law, yeah.
But people have no idea.
They have no idea what it
that
is,
means.
and because we all
Talk
and look,
about
this
being
is why I tell
antithetical
people,
to the Constitution.
someone in politics, because we all know someone that classifies themselves as a Muslim, and we like, man, but they're nice. And I'm not saying that every Islamic person or Muslim is a bad person. I get away from the titles. I go, I want to talk about the ideology, and you'll see a lot of Americanized Islamic people. Obviously, in Dearborn, they don't have to be because they've taken over. All of City Council, from last time I checked, is Islamic. All of it. I mean, and there was a city ordinance in Dearborn years ago that you couldn't, on the public street, on their main thoroughway, you could not have any religious. They do now the Islamic chant from the mosques. Out. I mean, it's out. I mean, you know the chants and the prayers. I mean, out publicly certain times a day. I mean, it's completely. Just look up Dearborn, Michigan. Now you have to ask yourself, is that appropriate?
You can see it.
I mean, you would that be appropriate in another country? Could we do that? Could we set up a little United States of America in Yemen or Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan? The answer is going to be no. And so why do we do it? I made the comment earlier with Saulo that in Mexico, you said you can't even wave another flag. You can't own property. My wife has dual citizenship. She's a Mexican citizen and a United States citizen. She was born in California, but she has Mexican citizen because of my in-laws, my suegros. And so, but you can't own property in Mexico unless you're a Mexican citizen. But yet organizations and corporations and people can buy property here.
Yeah.
We've got to rethink this. I see, and I understand freedom is our undergird, but we got to be very, very careful because this is a coordinated effort to take over America. And I'm going to say this, and I believe strongly about this. If we didn't have a strong Second Amendment, you think this
It would have
country
been easier and faster.
We'd be done by now,
Easier
in
and
my
faster.
opinion. In my opinion,
Annette says we need to stop importing this stuff. Irma says, always enjoy your program. Somebody else a little while ago said, I'm glad that I was able to connect to the after show. Thank you very much. If you're listening through X or, I finally got to say X instead of Twitter. Anyway, X, YouTube, or Facebook, please, we need to get these conversations out. And more, as you see, the world is changing and moving and people are getting more pissed. I think these type of conversations are going to be less, or they're going to want them to be less. So please help us get the word out. If you're watching on these different platforms, please heart it up and share it as much as you can. Also, somebody else said, freedom in the United States only applies to U.S. citizens. And Ray says there are multiple pillars of the Islams that Muslims study today.
Well, look, so to Ray's point, I mean, there's 5 pillars of Islam. The Shahada is the declaration of faith. There's no God but Allah, and the greatest of Muhammad of his prophets. The Salat, which is a prayer, which is what we were talking about, George and I. You pray 5 times a day to Mecca. The Zakat, which is almsgiving. They give a certain portion to some. It's like 2.5% or whatever it is. The Swam, if I'm pronouncing it right, that's a fasting during Ramadan. Every year. And then the Hajj, that's a pilgrimage to Mecca minimum once a year. And then many people believe that the 6th pillar of Islam is what, George? Jihad. Now, what the Islamic person will say, that's the more of a mental struggle. It's not a physical overtaking. It's more of overtaking yourself. The scholars can debate about that, and then we can see how it's being played out. And when you're looking at that, because everyone wants to rag on the Christian during the I don't know why I just got a mental freeze, George. I need your genius mind.
During the rally.
No,
during what?
During when the Christian countries pushed back and they against Islamic overtake years ago.
The Crusades.
The Crusades. Thank you, brother. I couldn't think of it. I just had a mental block. Through the Crusades, that people criticize. They think the Crusades was an offensive movement. It was truly a defensive movement because of jihad, because the Islamic countries were taking over different countries. Now, I'm not saying during the Crusades they didn't screw up and then they overdid it. I think that's some of the criticism that Israel is taking right now. Whatever, we can debate that, but call it what it is. The Crusades was not some morning they woke up and these Catholic, Christian, whatever countries said, hey, you know what? Let's go get us some Islamic people. Let's go jack some people up. It wasn't that way.
It's pretty unarguable. I mean, it's a separate issue of whether there were atrocities committed by allegedly Christians.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
There's no question about it that there were atrocities committed, but that's a different issue of what prompted the Crusades. It was between 1095, I think, and 1400. There were a number of expeditions by Western European countries into the Eastern Mediterranean to try to recover lost ground, the Holy Land from Muslim control. So it was a response to conquest of Christian lands, holy lands, and it was bloody and it was long, and like I said, it was three to four centuries, and there were multiple expeditions. So. But yeah, it was largely defensive in nature. It's fairly inarguable. There's a book by Dr. Rodney Stark on this issue, and it's called God's Battalions, and it's the true story of the Crusades, and it's well documented. You should get it. Dr. Rodney Stark, he's a professor. I think he's a professor of sociology at Baylor University, and he has a number of fantastic books. I think that's one of his better ones, God's Battalions. If you want to learn about what were the sort of geopolitical, religious issues behind the Crusades.
But I think the question we have to ask, George, thank you for those resources, we have to ask is why is there not in every media outlet this on the front page, Saulo? Why would it not be death to America? On every news outlet for a while, you had parents saying, how could you read this trash and this filth? And I want to get out of here. What do you mean get out of here? This is a school board meeting. We were elected, you're stupid asses. And then the cops would come in and take people out and all this other shit. I mean, this should be on every media outlet on both sides, right? Left, in between, it doesn't matter. Death to America, including the whole system of America. I mean, I don't understand.
Nico, would you think things like that, not that it's like, because sometimes I think we take freedom of speech too far. I understand that could be covered under freedom of speech. But as a leader, would you say, you know what, to keep the culture of America and to protect our people and the mentality, as a leader, would you venture to say, you know what, things like that, we're going to make an exception. Things like that, we are not going to allow. The death to America chance, that doesn't qualify freedom of speech because you're trying to crumble or,
Well, I think it's careful because if someone can say death to America, death to its ideology, and I want to change it properly, then you can do it. I'm really careful. I am almost
if you're saying death, even ideologically.
What I would like to see is a rabid pushback. Just saying, like, then get out of here. What do you mean by death? That's not accepted. Then media.
See it how? From the law perspective, or
I don't think so. I don't think you should criminalize the statement "death to America." Death to America and go out and shoot people. Death to America and do suicide bombings. Death to America and blow up. That's different because now you're tying it under the law of parties and under the organized crime statutes to death to America with instructions, because now it means something, versus death to the ideas of.
But
the
even
American
the attitude,
idea,
you wouldn't do anything for the attitude.
I think you gotta be very
That's
careful.
tough. You got
It's a
this
good
guy in
discussion,
front
but I
of
think it's
thousands of
careful.
people, and he's saying that the whole system needs to be annihilated, right? And then they're chanting death to America. I don't know. I mean, I think you're close to crossing the line. If you haven't
I
already.
didn't say that. You weren't. I'm just saying you got to be careful.
Yeah, I don't know. This kind of gets into. I think it gets into sedition. Where you're inciting.
But what I'm saying is, George,
resistance
to your point,
or inciting. It's an incitement against lawful authority. I don't know, man.
No. Here's the debate. Here's the discussion to the left. How do you look at that and look at January 6th?
No, that's right. But
and
that's
when President Trump said, "Look, I'm not saying people on January 6th didn't do something that was inappropriate. I got it.
The media has been totally silent on it.
Prosecute those people. But when you have Trump, we have the transcript saying, "Go, let your voice be heard, properly, peacefully protest." Yeah. That's why he hasn't been charged with insurrection, because they know they don't have it.
Yeah.
It's not like anybody's doing him any favors. But how do you look at that and try to distort what Trump said? Regardless of what people said, you gotta look at these things differently, and then look at what this guy said.
Contradictory.
Now, what I would
Joe
like
Biden's
to see, George,
Department of Justice prosecutes J6 insurrectionists because they want to preserve our democracy,
including
But
grandmas.
if they were to prosecute this prick, okay, and the whole crop around him who were chanting death to America and were saying that the whole system needed to be taken down, then they'd be racist. Then they'd be Islamophobic. I'm sorry, contradictory. So. We really have to look under the hood here and say and just say what are we making room for in this country? What are the consequences of this ideology spreading? Because it is spreading. As of 9 years ago, it's called a polling company, and they did a poll. Nico and I were talking about a lot about Islam about 8 or 9 years ago. And again, I'm separating the movement and the ideology here from individuals, and I just have to say this. I have people that I consider friends who are dear people for whom I have enormous respect.
And love for.
Genuine love for. Some of whom I'm interacting with right now in my business. People that I genuinely love and respect and care for, who are Muslim. And I would, if I had the chance, I would choose spending time with them over most Christians that I know. Mm-hmm. So it's not about that.
That's right.
This is way beyond that. Yep. What does Bill Turner say? I care about words on a page. Yep. I care about what the doctrine says. And I've studied it quite a bit for many, many, many years. And the doctrine is what it is. And I've read the hadiths. Yes, the translated hadiths. I get it. I don't speak Arabic, but there are some fantastic translations out there. And the authoritative hadiths, the Sahih al-Muslim, the Sahih al-Bukhari are the two most authoritative hadiths. If you read them and you can see how Sharia law is extrapolated from that, I mean, it's grotesque. Yep. It's everything that everybody in the media should be against, that they claim to be against.
Against
but in this case, they carve out an exception because it leads to the undermining of traditional America. It's disgusting. It's self-destructive.
My enemy's enemy is my friend. Go ahead, Joe.
Carlos was saying, it would be interesting if the Jews would start chanting death to Palestine or down with Palestine. Don says, society should have definitely pushed back. He should be charged and deported for saying death to America. Alamo says, I remember what those animals did on January 6th. How can we forget? Ray Rodriguez says, too bad for people can't get this message. Ernest says, a big part of it starts with what is taught to the youngest of us in school. That's what we were talking about in the beginning. Amy says, is stating death to America tantamount to yelling fire in the theater?
These are the discussions that need to be had. But death to America, isn't that what burning the American flag is?
But it should be invested.
No, I don't know.
The thing is, like, if I'm saying, you know what, I want the court to defend me, but burn the court down. I'm like, you're trying to bring down what's going to defend you.
But you have a right to be illogical. You have a right to be a dumb.
Okay.
You have a right to. That's what the Constitution protects.
But it's that grave. It's that you're talking about an individual who's talking to a captive audience, and they're responding accordingly to what he's saying.
But they're not acting yet. They're not acting yet.
True. It should be at least investigated.
100%. Now, this is what I've been waiting to say this. What I would do
on what grounds? Investigated
as potential terroristic act. Or a criminal activity.
Christopher Wray just testified before Congress again and said that a terroristic attack as a result of a porous, non-existent border. A terrorist attack on the United States, basically similar to what happened in Russia a few weeks ago, is likely. That the probability is very high. You have the former head of CENTCOM who just said the same thing, that an ISIS-style attack on the United States is all but inevitable. So these things, this is an existential threat. It should, at least in this climate, be investigated.
You know why it's so important to have these conversations? Because I think later on, this type of conversation, they're going to call it terrorist because we're trying to incite people to go against the system. And then they're going to start investigating us, right? That's where we're going.
Well, we're not the ones doing it. They are. We're talking about ideas, conservative ideas, family ideas, things like, for example, against transgender, whatever, right? They're going to see that as, these guys are terrorists. Because the definitions have changed. Well, look, we already saw that. If parents are considered domestic terrorists for going to a school, it's all about the definitions and the labels that you try to place. You call someone stupid and they don't respond to that, then they're going to act stupid. If a lie goes unchecked, it becomes the truth. You've got to check bullshit and lies. And so, yes, parents are being domestic terrorists for what? Because they don't want their kids talking about oral sex and ass banging. I mean, just be honest about it, what it is. Because some of these books are horrible. These are horrible books and they have no right. I mean, look, an adult, you do whatever the hell you want. I truly believe that. I believe in that type of autonomy. And so does the Bible, Scripture does. There's consequences, but whatever. But not to children. They're innocent. So you got parents trying to fight for that. And then you have people yelling death to America. What I would have done if I was the head of the DOJ or any type of authoritative, it's like, look, although the Constitution at this point supports that type of activity, it's unacceptable. It's not going to be, and we're going to look into you. I'm putting you on notice now that we're looking into you. Keep them in check. Just say we're going to look at everything that I would look at bank accounts. I would look who they're communicating with. Everything that you do when you're looking at a criminal organization, I would look at them. I'm not saying act on it yet until there's probable cause and there's proper due process. Because if we argue due process, there's got to be due process. But you got to put people on check. If you just say, oh shit, it's like we're scared shitless to say anything because you could be labeled something. You say something against the new definition of family and you support a traditional, you're a homophobe. Oh shit, I want to be called a homophobe. You say something, oh, you're a misogynist. Oh, you're this. Yeah. You're Islamophobe. Yeah. But there's no Christian phobes. These people in books talking about giving fellatio to Jesus Christ. Well, that's disgusting to me.
Yeah.
And so you're not a Christian phobe. Where are the Jesus phobe labels? Nobody gives a shit about that because Christians are like piñatas, where everybody swings at the Christian and we just get hit, and they have not taught the Christian to speak back. To speak back with their mind and vote and to be and advocate and stand for what you stand for and understand what you stand for and advocate what you stand for. That's why people say, you Christians are a bunch of wussies. You don't know what the hell you believe. I'm going to go somewhere else on people that do, because everybody else knows what they believe, but Christians don't. Bullshit, or conservatives, whatever you want to label somebody.
And I think the United States government has traditionally had a sober view of Islamism gaining any kind of political foothold in the country. And we've, there have been a number of investigations on particularly the Muslim Brotherhood, its influences inside the United States, and the recognition that it's basically a political movement wrapped in a religion. Right. And we need to understand that. We need to understand that central to the teaching. And again, I'm not talking about someone's personal theology. I'll leave that alone. I'm talking about the doctrinal view of the kafir. The unbeliever, any non-Muslim.
That's what is a kafir.
Any non-Muslim is a kafir. And the books of doctrine that you were just talking about, whether it's the Quran or the Sirah or the Hadith, all of those devote a significant amount of time to the kafir, and it ain't good. So while the Quran doctrinally is about 14% of
Islam,
yes, in terms of the words dedicated to the doctrine, about 14% of Islam, it dedicates about 65% to the kafir. And it's not pleasant. It's
not flattering.
And so the kafir is described as evil and disgusting and sort of the lowest form of life. And if you read just through the Quran without even wading into the Sirah, you can see that a kafir can be and should be deceived. A kafir should be plotted against. A kafir should be hated, enslaved.
He's talking about the doctrine of taqiyya. So you can deceive to further the Islamic movement. There's a defense. There's an apologetic defense to that.
Like Ilan Umar. No, I'm joking.
That's taqiyya. It's a strategy.
Yeah, strategy.
So but it's more than that. I mean, horrible things can be done. You can be tortured and worse. And I think people need to understand that's central to the movement. And it's not just the Quran, it's the Sira and the Hadith. The Sira is at least 81% of the Sira is dedicated to the kafir. So we gotta have a practical, rational view here, so that we don't do stupid things
and a working knowledge of what
hurting
we're
ourselves
dealing with.
inside.
You got to understand what you're dealing with here. I mean, look, in Dallas years ago when I was DA, they by one vote, city council, and not in Dallas, was it in Dallas or one of the surrounding cities? I'm not sure, but it was in that area. By one vote, this shit was disgusting. I couldn't believe it at the time. Now I would believe it today. That they were going to set up a separate Sharia court, where the Sharia would control people. And if a woman is insubordinate, there could be physical abuse to that woman. I mean, there's a lot of shit you need to think about. I'm talking about, what
I
they
almost
do.
made a joke, but Jesus stopped me right
Good,
there.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I mean, to mutilation to the clitoris because of sex
Stop
and
it.
what a woman's
Yeah.
role is for sex and for men and reproduction and enjoyment and all that. I mean, just all I'm saying is study it and then ask somebody. I ask them. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a scholar in it, but I know enough to be dangerous. Maybe.
Amy says, Gene, if your words elicit an illegal action, then they are not protected. That's what he says. Check this. And then also, James says this: death to America sounds like a call to arms, a challenge to every American that hears or is aware that it is what is proclaimed.
I get all that. All I'm saying is, before we jump there, let's get there properly. Let's think this through. Do not make an emotional decision. If we believe in free speech, it's not just the speech we like. We got to be careful. Look, this is Autism Awareness Month. This whole week, Davi and I have really, with you interviewing us on Tuesday, and then me and Davi on Thursday night, because George was busy on R-Rated Christianity. And then I did some posts about one of Michael's meltdowns, and it just got a lot of traction. I mean, look, but I support, even though I'm so passionate about special needs, I can't stand, I'm going to say the word, even though I hate it, I can't stand the word retard, because it's been bastardized. I say every other cuss word except for the Lord's name in vain, but I can't stand that word. I hate that word. Because now mental retardation is an actual condition. But I support a comedian's right in free speech to make fun of kids on the spectrum. You can make all the goofy kids, autistic jokes and special needs jokes. I have a right not to listen to you. I have a right to speak out against it. I have a right to call you disrespectful and inconsiderate. I have a right to say go fuck off, and he has a right to say it back to me. That's free speech. So all I'm saying is I truly believe in free speech. I know there's limitations. Hey, Saulo, go over there and kick the shit out of Dom, and I'm going to set Dom up, and I'm going to put him there. Well, that's called conspiracy. I don't support, anything. Hey, go shoot that person. Hey, make sure you shoot someone if they come. Well, I didn't shoot him, but you told them. You gave a plan, right? We understand the RICO acts and the godfathers of organizations that order murders. They didn't do the murder, but they ordered them. I get all that, and I agree with that. That's where the free speech is not protected. But other than that, I'm pretty staunch about it. So all I'm saying, I think it's fucking disgusting when you yell death to America and all its systems. I think it says something about you. I says you're not here to assimilate, for sure.
You're not with us.
You're not with us. You're here to take over. You're here to transform America. Yeah. Then we have to decide as Americans, because this sumbitch ain't an American, or you're trying to redefine what America is. Then we have to decide, what do we do about it? That's not acceptable. Then we go, we make laws, and then we vote on it, and the people have spoken again. I'm just saying we got to get there the right way. That's it.
And I just think about how successful this Marxist system has worked now, to the point where Americans can't even recognize dangers to themselves. I mean, they've been taught to hate themselves and despise their own system, that now they can't even determine a legitimate danger. This is Marxist. It's Alinskian in nature, after Saul Alinsky. This is a strategy. I did go back, because I you know how I said that, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, when I was talking about one of Saul Alinsky's famous axioms, where he says the issue is never the issue. It's always about the revolution. Mm-hmm. It's never the issue. The issue is always about the revolution. And he said that the fomenting of discontent with self, this is what I'm saying, this can happen in Dearborn because Americans have been taught to hate themselves. Yeah. Americans have been taught in the name, right, exactly, in the name of civil rights, right? We've been taught to hate ourselves. And here's Alinsky's own words, quote, an organizer, is Barack Obama listening? The community organizer must stir up dissatisfaction and discontent. He must create a mechanism that can drain off the underlying guilt for having accepted the previous situation for such a long time. And out of this mechanism, a new community organization arises. Mm-hmm. It is a mechanism. Self-hatred is a mechanism for change. And you commercialize it. You broaden it. You make it politically widespread. And so this is well coordinated. Yeah. We've talked about it at the youngest of the young. And now you're and it's not just that. I mean, then you've got an open border. So you've got people that have no allegiance to the country, no connection to our ethos at all. And you have others who outright hate the country, and ironically use the freedoms of the country to talk about how they hate the country. Yeah. Try that shit anywhere else. Yeah. This is what I think. It's befuddling to me. This is a cult that you can actually sit there and talk about how this is the most rotten, discriminatory, disgusting country in the world. But yet the same country you're saying that is the country that allows you the environment, the free environment to say those things. You try that anywhere else. I mean, what the fuck is wrong with these people?
It just shows that they're here to conquer, not to help and be part of it. I mean, they're here to take over. That's it. That's what that mindset tells me. And so, look how fast 45 minutes went by, brother. I mean, this is crazy. And we planned on talking about, we didn't even plan on talking about this one. We plan on talking about other things, about abortion, O.J. Simpson, whatever. I mean, no, but we wanted we wanted to dissect the abortion issue, and we didn't. So maybe we can do it on the after show next week.
Yes.
But it tells you a lot that not every media outlet is talking about this and showing this and bringing this up for point of discussion for society to look at. It tells you either they're scared shitless, or they're part of the.
They agree with what it's
that's
doing.
That's my point. Yeah. But they're not looking at the consequences, because then they're next. The crocodile's coming for them. Yeah. They're next, and that's what it is. But look, there's a lot to talk about next week. We'll dissect some of these issues. Salo, thanks for joining in and covering. Thank you for joining in. We hope that you enjoy these conversations, this critical thinking. We love having conversations. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for sharing. And please continue to share with people that you think might benefit from it. We enjoy doing it. I hope you enjoy listening and watching as we enjoy doing it. Have a very blessed weekend, and we hope that you tune in next week.